Some abusive men are dumb. Some are loud, some of them are obvious or covert, and some are strategic. They don't raise their voice right away. They may not threaten. They sound thoughtful, measured, right? They talk about fairness and logic and balance, and they use comparisons that kind of almost work. And that's kind of the problem, because when something almost works, you start doing the work for it. You start filling in the gaps. You doubt yourself instead of questioning the very frame that you've just been handed because, hey, he loves you, right? So you're standing in your kitchen with your phone in your hand and you already decided not to answer him, right? You decided that like 30 minutes ago. You even said it out loud to yourself. I'm not doing this tonight. And then the text comes in anyway. Something really short. Maybe it looks calm on the surface, right? So my feelings don't matter now. So cliche, right? It's so cliche. You know exactly where this goes. You don't feel confused at all, but you feel cornered. You pause, you reread it, you start typing something careful. You don't want to be defensive. You hate being defensive. Something balanced, something that kind of proves that you're reasonable. And you hate that you're doing this again, but you also know that if you don't respond the right way, then the whole night is ruined. You hate when he says his feelings don't matter or that he's not allowed to have feelings. God, it's so cliche. It is such a classic line. You know this feeling you have? That's what it feels like to be pulled into this kind of pseudo-intellectual manipulation in real time. I'm Lisa Sonni. I'm a relationship coach who specializes in abusive dynamics and trauma bonds. Subscribe so you do not miss my videos where I expose abusive men and their tactics. Now, this way of talking, it doesn't just show up in private relationships. It shows up in culture, and that's why this is so dangerous. You hear it from men who sound intelligent, right? Credentialed, authoritative. And because of that, a lot of women miss the misogyny that's happening right in front of them entirely. They think, well, he's smart, he's calm, he's educated, so maybe I'm the one missing something. You hear this pattern in people like Jordan Peterson, in people like Scott Galloway, and more recently in Dr. K on Diary of a CEO. Different aesthetics, different audiences, sure, but hey, same underlying move, which is turn harm into opinion, and then we just call it logic. Dr. K made a comparison that sounds reasonable if you're not listening closely. He describes a situation where his wife feels sad and he feels angry and yells, and the conclusion offered is that both are feelings and therefore both should be treated as equally valid. And on the surface, sounds balanced, right? Adult, emotionally intelligent. How can you argue with that, right? Watch me. I don't fall for this crap anymore. When you actually look at it and you think about it, it falls apart immediately. Crying is a physiological response. It's involuntary. It doesn't change the environment in a threatening way, and it doesn't shut the other person down. Yelling is not a feeling, right? It is a behavior. Anger is a feeling. Yelling is a choice, and it's one that escalates the situation. It changes the power dynamic, and in an abusive relationship, it's so often used very specifically and purposefully to instill fear and overwhelm or just shut the conversation down, and there's no solution. So calling those two things equivalent because they both originate from feeling, it erases behavior, it erases choice, impact, power, and that erasure always benefits the person who yells, or in these cases, the man who yells. But he doesn't want to talk about that part, right? He wants pseudo-logic, not actual logic. Now, watch how that logic plays out in real life, not on a podcast, but in your living room. So you're sitting on your couch and you finally say you're hurt by something he said earlier, right? Your voice cracks, your eyes have tears in them. You're not performing. You are literally just reacting. And he leans back and says, you see, this is the problem. You get emotional. And when I get angry and raise my voice, suddenly I'm the bad guy. But my feelings matter too, but you don't seem to think so. And just like that, you're not talking about what hurt you. You're defending the idea that yelling is different from crying, and you're trying so hard not to sound unfair. And he'll probably say you're manipulating him by crying. You feel yourself moving into explanation mode, right? So trying to prove that you're not dismissing him and your original point, gone. There's no mutual understanding. He literally set a trap using false equivalence. And Scott Galloway uses the same BS structure when he talks about women and dating and power. He just dresses it up as something else. He'll talk about realism, right? Incentives and how things actually work. And the conclusion is almost always that women just need to lower their expectations, accept less, adapt more, and understand men better. This guy has repeatedly said that women have been sold a lie about having it all and that men are falling behind, right? Women need to adjust their expectations accordingly. But that frames male underachievement and their kind of overall disengagement as just some reality that women have to accommodate, right? Not behavior that men are actually responsible for changing, at least if they want partnerships with women. It kind of sounds pragmatic, like a hard truth, but that's what so many of these losers open up with, right? It's just the truth. Or they'll say, no one wants to hear this, but Galloway has explicitly argued that women should consider dating older men or men that they're not even attracted to in order to stabilize society and relationships. They present women's desire for compatibility and attraction and emotional safety as some unrealistic market distortion. That's not a harsh truth. That's an opinion. It's a misogynistic opinion. And consistently, it ignores the impact of male behavior and male entitlement, male disengagement, and male hostility, while reframing women's boundaries as like irrational or that women are so entitled or naive. That's not neutral. That is not a good analysis at all. That is justification pretending to be truth. And it lands exactly where abusive men want it to land, which is with women doubting their right to want more in the first place. Now, Jordan Peterson does it differently, and it's sort of like pseudo-depth and abstraction, right? Anytime I mention Jordan Peterson, people get a little upset, right? A handful of women start defending him, right? Name one misogynistic thing he's ever said. You see in my comment sections all the time. Sadly, this video won't be long enough for me to cover all the misogynistic things that he's ever said. But let's go through a couple top-level examples, okay? He said that the cure for incels is enforced monogamy. But later, he clarified that all he meant was socially enforced, right? Not legally. But how does that actually change the premise? It doesn't. The premise is that women's sexual autonomy is treated as this destabilizing social force, and men's resentment or violence is framed as a problem that society should manage by pressuring women into compliance. He's also said that when women wear makeup at work, they're trying to be sexually attractive, and then questioned how men and women can reasonably work together given sexual dynamics, which quietly shifts the responsibility away from men's behavior and onto women's presentation. But he sounds thoughtful, right? He uses long sentences, mythology, evolutionary stories, and symbolic framing. And if you disagree, the implication isn't just that you're wrong, you're shallow, you're emotional, you're just ideological, you're unserious. The power move is not usually in one single claim, right? It's in the way that disagreement is framed as intellectual failure. Like you're not smart enough to get it. Abusive men do this at home all the time. They don't have to shout you down if they can just talk you into thinking that you're not smart enough to argue back. Back to your actual life. You're standing at the kitchen counter. It's late. You bring up that he cheated. You're not even yelling. You're not being dramatic. You're literally just asking a direct question about trust. And he responds by saying that he's angry that you don't trust him and that you're questioning, it feels really controlling. Then he says that you're angry about the cheating and he's angry about the lack of trust. So you're both angry and you both need to compromise. And your brain stalls, right? You feel paralyzed because fairness means symmetry, equal feelings, equal weight, equal sacrifice, right? Isn't that what you always thought? You don't know how to defend why that comparison feels like just off, wrong. Enter Lisa. Cheating destabilizes the relationship, right? It violates trust, and he's put your emotional and your physical safety at risk. His anger is a reaction to accountability, right? Typical abusive man, he can't be accountable. So your anger is a response to betrayal, but he's going to treat those as equivalent, right? That's not fair. It's actually dishonest. And the dishonesty functions on purpose to protect him from consequence, which is the point. This is the same garbage move that abusive men use when they present control as negotiation, right? Here's another example. He tells you to quit your job because you travel, and that makes him mad. You say no, you love your job. And he says if you don't, then he's going to keep seeing his mistress. He frames it calmly, right? It's a trade. I'm angry, you're angry. You're angry about an affair. He's angry about the job you've always had. You're both unhappy. Let's solve both problems, right? Seems fair. Suddenly you're trying to explain why this doesn't make any sense without sounding unreasonable. You don't want to sound dismissive to his concern, right? You want to sound like you care about his feelings. You want to actually care about his feelings. But now you're defending reality. You're not questioning why he's using anger as leverage to control your life. This is the way that they use misdirection and confusion just to get what they want, but they dress it up like logic. So you're worked up, you're exhausted, and you're not even seeing it. This is right where so many women get all tripped up because the language forces you into defending what should never require defense. Pseudo-intellectual speak really just moves the burden of proof onto you. It makes you argue inside a frame that is designed to benefit him. And I'm telling you, the longer you stay inside this ridiculous frame, the more exhausted and self-doubting you become. So step right out of that. I teach women how to step out of that, but let's keep going. Here's another real-time scene, okay? You are sitting at the table and it's midnight and you've been talking in circles for hours. You are exhausted, just depleted. He says he just wants better communication. And every time he tries to talk, you just shut down. That's not healthy, right? That's not healthy at all. I care about you. We need to talk. But what he doesn't say is that every single conversation turns into a lecture. He's not going to say that your words are being dissected and reframed and that accountability is something he's never going to take. Never. That your shutdown that he's so mad about is a nervous system response to being interrogated. But now the problem is your shutdown, right? Not about his behavior. Ooh, change topics again. Perfect. That's exactly what he wanted. Communication becomes the weapon and you start working on yourself again instead of questioning why nothing ever changes. You just feel crazy. But this is why smart sounding men can be more dangerous than the overtly cruel ones. You don't see the hit coming. You think you're having a discussion. You think you're being an adult. You think if you just explain it clearly enough, he'll understand. He already understands. He's using the conversation to maintain leverage or, as the red pill losers call it, maintain frame. Here's another moment and my last example. You're driving, your hands are on the wheel, right? Gripping tight, and he's explaining calmly why you provoked his explosion earlier. He says that if you hadn't pushed, he wouldn't have reacted that way. So you both need to change. You nod, not because you agree, because you're driving, and because you know that arguing is only going to escalate things because they always do. This is how women end up carrying the weight of abusive and toxic relationships that are never going to get better while men sit there all smug, feeling justified and rational. Okay, so how do you respond? Because I'm talking a lot about what not to do. Listen, you do not defeat a false equivalence by arguing harder inside it. You reject the frame entirely. You stop debating whether his feelings matter. Now, I suggest don't argue at all and actually just learn how to leave a man like this altogether. I know it's not easy, but if you must respond, I want you to start naming what his feelings are actually being used to justify. At the very least, I want you to do this for yourself in a journal or your head. He's justifying control, punishment, coercion, all of it. Stop accepting the idea that all feelings demand accommodation. Feelings exist and behavior has consequences. Impact matters, power matters, and intent does not cancel harm. But abusive men, they love to say that they're allowed to feel a certain way. That's true and irrelevant. The issue is not what he feels, it's what he does with it and who pays for it over time. When yelling and cheating, threatening, withholding, or controlling are just reframed as his feelings, the accountability is just out the window and you're left sitting there unable to figure out how in the hell you got here. Here's the cumulative cost if you stay inside these frames. You lose trust in your instincts. You feel it, right? You start preparing arguments instead of just listening to yourself. They drive up the defensiveness, don't they? You feel so exhausted after these ridiculous circular conversations that go literally nowhere, just endless circles of arguing. You take responsibility for things that are not even yours. And the relationship is going to stay exactly the same because it was never about misunderstanding. It was always about power. Subscribe and tell me in the comments what pseudo-intellectual garbage he uses on you. But if this reorganized how you see your past conversations, if you can suddenly see why nothing you said ever worked, book a session with me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.